Welcome to Mr. Tiger Drop Films. Now, I'm a bit injured for this video because I had a wisdom tooth surgery earlier in the week, so I'm still recovering, drinking a bunch of Tarners and Stamina X's and Stamina Sparks. But regardless, it's customary on this channel to do some kind of predictions video for a new likeadragongaiden game. And wouldn't you know it, we have a Mine one coming up pretty soon, so let me just give you all the details and my analysis on what I would really hope to expect from a Mine standalone Gaiden game. Ultimately, what I really expect from something like this caliber, because to be perfectly frank, and I've already done a little hype video and a concern video over Kiwami 3 as a whole, you can check it out right here, but I'm not really excited for Kiwami 3 because I just think Yakuza 3 didn't need a remake. In addition to the casting changes and the other pretty big controversies going on for the game, and overall my opinion on just how it's a lot more altruistic to just preserve games and port them. Although I will say that in terms of the Yakuza franchise, they haven't really been bearing down on the remakes too much. I mean, it's been about 9 years since Kiwami 2 released, and unless you count Ishin Kiwami, only about 3 years by the time Kiwami 3 comes out. But regardless, when it comes to February releases of 2026, would I rather get Kiwami 3 over Resident Evil 9? Probably, just because, well, you know, I hate to say that, but I feel like Capcom isn't really narrowing down on all the great strengths of Resident Evil's entire franchise for its big 9th game. So I'm a little disappointed and wary of that release. I'm sure it'll still be good, but above all, between Kiwami 3 Resident Evil 9, I do think that the Dark Ties Gaiden for Mine is the only saving grace for games to look forward to, at least when it comes to some of my favorite games, franchises. But regardless, what do I want out of Dark Ties, well, this is an interesting one. Compared to Kiryu's Gaiden, or even Majima's Pirate Gaiden, Mine's is an interesting one. First of all, we finally get to play as an actual Yakuza for an entire game from the look of it. And he's a guy who we already know where his story goes. He dies at the end of Yakuza 3. You know, he has some kind of bromance with Daigo. He chops Kanda's head off. And he's all around a pretty violent guy underneath a calm, cool facade. Well, I mean, he is a calm guy, it's just he's got these dark edges, these dark ties to him that really break out over the course of Yakuza 3's story. You know, he's the Kirin for a reason. But for Dark Ties, a really direct prequel of Yakuza 3, one where Mine's hanging out with Daigo for the first time and meeting Kanda, and in addition to a brand new character named Kari Shinpei, who I am almost certain is going to be the final boss for Mine's Dark Ties. I mean, just look at him. If he isn't some big supporting character, either, I don't know, maybe Daigo's going to be the final boss, who's to say? Maybe Kiryu. I've heard some theories that's going to end with Kiryu, but I don't think that's the way it's going to go, right? I don't think they're just going to give you the ending of Yakuza 3, but reverse. This isn't that Revenge of the Sith game on the PS2. No, this is different. Regardless, I do think Kari is going to be Mine's final boss. I know almost nothing to him, but I do predict that he's going to be the antagonist. My other prediction, or some kind of fear, is about Kanda. Now look, Kanda, whoever they got to do his English voice, is pretty good. Same with Mine. And then we got Roger Craig Smith voicing Daigo in this English dub. He returns. Daddy Chris Redfield himself. I think in terms of Dark Ties, the English dub will be pretty good. And at least with Dark Ties, you don't really have to worry about any odd celebrity recasting, so that's a good thing. Again, I think if they were to separate Dark Ties from Kiwami 3, I would definitely buy Dark Ties. I'm at the fence of just watching a Let's Play, and I hate to say that just because, I don't know, I'm just really hoping for that Stranger Than Heaven the game to come out. Regardless, my other prediction for Dark Ties, more of a fear, is all about Kanda. I really hope they don't try to make us empathize with Kanda too much. I like him as a slimy, goofy, just scuzzball. I mean, look at him. He's just gross, and that's the best way to describe Kanda, right? You look at his Irizumi, it fits him. He's obsessed with women, he's a dirty freak that can't keep his hands to himself, and it fits his Irizumi. It's a bit ironic in a way. You know, he's his elegant Irizumi, and he's not an elegant guy. And of course, if you're a devoted fan of the original Yakuza 3, you know that you'll fight Kanda a lot in the climax battles. He's memorable. That stupid QTE and all the good stuff. But between his role in this and then the Conda damage control minigame, that's kind of like the Akame Network. I don't know how I feel about that one. I mean, come on, look, like I said, this is the first Gaiden to really be a direct prequel. By that, I mean, you know where Conda's story's gonna go. He's gonna end up his head getting chopped off and put in a suitcase. So I don't really want to spend time helping with damage control. I know, it'd be like if they had you doing damage control for Sohei Dojima in Yakuza 0. It just wouldn't feel right. I'm sure this is just a way to let you do some sub-stories with Mine, which brings me to my next prediction that the sub-stories from Mine will be a real highlight. He gets to be a bit more violent and more actual Yakuza criminal-like, which will be an interesting way to go, and that is a breath of fresh air of the franchise. I loved Pirates for being goofy and giving me everything I could want in terms of just Majima aesthetics, gameplay, costumes, and some cool supporting characters. But for a Mine game, I expect him to be cold and just have that underlying violence underneath his eyes, that gaze of his. And to add to that, if we really are, according to some screenshots, going to see Mine get his Kirin Irizumi from none other than Urabori himself, then that's going to be pretty interesting. Because remember, Urabori made the Irizumi for Nishiki and Kiryu and helped finish Rikia's. And then Ryuji's Irizumi was made by some other artist in Osaka. But for Urabori to be that tied to Mine, that's going to be a pretty interesting revelation. Overall, I feel like my prediction for the overall story is just going to be about a man's descent to the criminal underworld. We've already had so many Yakuza games about leaving it, whether Kiryu, Majima, or Ichiban, or Saejima, wanting to put the criminal past behind you no matter how much you get tied into it. For Mine, we're going to see a businessman who loses his way. He gets Norman Osborn treatment, as we saw in the trailer. He gets excluded from his company by the damn shareholders. And he's going to have nowhere else to turn but the Yakuza. And what does that mean for him? Well, he's going to rise to the top. I think that is a big draw for me in the story. If they can just nail that and his meeting with Daigo, I think that's all I really want from a Mine Gaiden. However, I expect to see some more twists. I hope there's some other boss fights for Mine, whether that's him fighting, I don't know, freaking Hasabe, the deadliest man of the Tosho clan. I mean, look at it. You guys ready for Dragon Engine Hasabe? You are. He's the deadliest Yakuza character of all time, and you only fight him once. But on a more serious note, I do want to see some more boss fights from Mine. I know his other big side content minigame is this new underground fighting arena on Kamurocho. That's kind of a mix of the dungeons from the previous Dragon Engine games, like the Ichiban ones, which is fine. Now, when looking at the combat and talking about this new Coliseum mode, I mean, look, it's Yakuza combat. Yes, I know people like to talk about Lost Judgment and some other Dragon Engine games as having the best combat, but if you ask me, I still miss the days of the original Yakuza 3, 4, and 5. And of course the PS2 games. I feel like there's something intrinsically arcadey about them that was so much fun to enjoy. Now, the new games are still arcadey, but sometimes there's a clash of the realism and the physics, and overall just removing features, whether it's gear or your heat system, case in point, Kiwami 3, and over-reliance on fighting styles and not really zoning in on making some cool enemies to fight to complement those fighting styles. So overall, I'm sure Mine's gonna play fun from the gameplay trailer, and he has a weird, I don't know, like PS3 era rage mode, like symbiote power. Everybody remember Bubba Shadows? But I mean, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun to play around with, especially in a short game. And it's cool that this is we finally get to play as every original Yakuza boss, right? We first had Ryuji in Dead Souls. Although I still want to play Dead Souls, please port that next, Sega. And then you have Nishiki and the weird Yakuza directors, or Yakuza 0 director's cut. And now we finally have Mine, so the original 3 bad guys, they're cohesive. We look at their Irizumis, they're all finally playable in some way. Some weird, wacky way, and I guess that's gonna kinda explain Dark Ties, huh? It's kind of a weird way of getting more Mine storytelling, but if you ask me, did I really need a Mine prequel? Well, not really. But I do predict that it's going to be about a man's descent into darkness and his kind of bromance with Daigo, and I hope it explores what happens to Kamurocho and that vacuum between Yakuza 2 and 3, right? I do think it'd be cool if they show Stardust getting its new design, right? At least I hope they do that in the Dragon engine. That new like red and gold design for Stardust. That was one of the really memorable things about Yakuza 3's Kamurocho. It'd be cool, maybe Mini can fight Yuya and Kazuki. I think that'd be cool. Maybe he can meet some other side characters while having his own to boot. And overall, I think whatever Kiwami 3, the main game, does, I might not be the biggest fan of it, of course. Or I don't like some of the changes, but for Dark Ties, we're finally getting a game of Kamurocho, and my biggest hope and concern is that they actually make Kamurocho interesting, right? I think the last time we really had a big spotlight was, the Kaito Files? And yeah, it was Infinite Wealth and got some much needed fan service for Kiryu, where fun goes on and some other cool details, but Kamurocho and 8 was more of just a fun thing to include because it's Kiryu's last game, right? I was happy that it wasn't in Mana Race's name because I felt like that was the game to exclude Kamurocho, and they did that right. It made the impact in Infinite Wealth that much better. But for Mini Gaiden, that's going to take place in 2008? I guess it could be interesting. I just hope they either really open up Kamurocho or give it some new twist so it really feels fresh this time. Because look, I love Kamurocho like all of you guys. But when you look at the games and the whole catalog, there's some instances where Kamurocho really sticks out and some where it really just fades into the background. So I hope that overall that Dark Ties gives Kamurocho a new coat of paint and some new depth that's really needed for this iconic location. That brings me to my next prediction, and that is that Dark Ties might show us everything that has happened with both the Tojo clan and the Omi, but also something more into Mine as a character, that dark spot. That is, if they can really explore his relationship with his father before his father died and he was forced to be an orphan. If they can really zero in that connection, that direct parallel between Kiryu and Mine before he even meets Kiryu, then I think it could be setting up something really special. But as I mentioned earlier, I don't really think we needed a Mine Gaiden, because when I look at the original Yakuza 3, I got pretty much everything I needed out of Mine to make him memorable, and the care, and the hate him. And that's going to be my next kind of point. I hope they don't make us empathize for Mine too much. I still want him to be very, I don't want to say dislikable, but between Nishiki and Ryuji, Mine felt like a good evolution and being different from the previous two antagonists. He was still villainous, right? I mean, come on, Mine's the guy, he chopped off Kanda's head, right? He's the reason that happened. He stabbed a guy in an airplane. And third, he destroyed Morning Glory of Tamashiro, so he's a schemer too, right? We remember Mine for his sad backstory, but you only feel for that story. You really start to empathize with it after you beat him in the boss fight, and you get that heartbreaking phone call from his secretary, and then you hear about his relationship with Daigo and whatnot, and it all really culminates there. That's what makes Mine memorable, to the point that he sacrifices himself to defeat Richardson. He flies, huh? So above all, I feel like Dark Ties has a very difficult premise in of itself. Is it gonna make us see Mine as some kind of lovable dork who lost his big CEO job, or are we gonna feel a little too bad for him if they really make his life horrible? Is it just gonna be a full-on romance of Daigo? Are they gonna make Kanda some way redeemable? I don't know. See, there's one thing about Yakuza 3, a lot of its villains are deliciously evil, whether that's Kanda or Mine. Like, sure, showing how they both fell into the criminal underworld is one thing, but I don't want them to kind of shine a light on them being like, oh, we're just stuck in this, we had no choice. I don't know. Mine, he made some pretty diabolical choices in the original Yakuza 3. So I hope that Dark Ties at least paves a way for him becoming that version of himself, letting the Kirin take over, and making sure that we can see why he had a strong connection with Daigo in the first place. Because Mine's the kind of guy that can get really wrapped up in his loneliness. That's at least my reading of him. And once they finally found that light with Daigo and the path of the Yakuza and that kind of admiration for your superior, that's kind of what gave him purpose. So if Dark Ties just manages to fumble any of that, or do really nothing with its screen time, then I'm going to be really disappointed. But like I said, I think that new Kari character is going to be the final boss for this Gaiden, just because it would make sense to have some new character to kind of bridge that gap and show what makes Mine the Kirin that he is. And above all, I hope that all the content, whether it's the weird Kanda damage control, to the Coliseum, to the new sub-stories, and whatever weird surprises, even down to the way that Mine does karaoke and all kinds of other minigames like, say, bowling and darts. I hope it all just makes some kind of cohesive sense that makes it a good, complementary piece to the original Yakuza 3, not just the Kiwami version, but the original Yakuza 3. Can Darktai stand on its own two legs as a complement to the original Yakuza 3? That is my biggest hope, because at the end of the day, like I said, Darktai has a very delicate balance. It's not a prequel where we already kind of know what happens with Kiryu and Man erases name, nor is it just its own sequel, as we saw with Pirate Yakuza and Hawaii of Majima. It's at a very particular point in the timeline that has its own unique, well, sinister feel to it, right? Right back when the Yakuza were still trying to cling on to some kind of glory, some kind of satisfaction of the underworld. And if this can at least show that there is a story to tell of playing as an antagonist, a sort of antagonistic force that might have some light in them, then I will be excited and hopefully pleasantly surprised. And if we get to see more of Daigo, then that's a good thing, right? I was hoping we get a Daigo Gaiden, but I think this is the closest bet. Next, I hope we get some kind of Akiyama Gaiden or Saijima one. Or Ryuji. As it stands, I do think that revisiting Mine as a character is interesting, and I am very, very excited to hear Nakamura return to play Mine. That is going to be an absolute treat. And if this game can at least keep opening the door for different stories in the Yakuza universe without trying to show us everything, then that could be a good thing. Like, do I want a Nishiki Gaiden? No. But do I want a Ryuji one? I'm more inclined to say yes. It just really depends on how you do it. Because for these particular time period pieces for these Yakuza spin-offs, you do need to get a bit more darker and serious, kind of like the original PS2 games and Yakuza 3. And, you know, of course, a lot of these games are still dark. I'm just saying, like, that particular classic, like, early 2000s, late 90s feel, I kind of want to have that feeling still intact. And that includes the soundtrack. I think the soundtrack for Dark Ties is going to be pretty good, a bit more jazz feel. And if Dark Ties is just bridging the gap for us to get excited for a game like Stranger Than Heaven, which hopefully has a whole new engine, then, you know, I do think Dark Ties might end up being a pretty, hopefully important release in RG's catalog of Yakuza games. Because if you're going to revisit one of the three big bads of the franchise, you gotta do them right. You gotta do them justice. You gotta let them fly. So those are some of my predictions for the story. Hopefully those are just enough to get you excited, but I want to hear what you guys think in the comments below, please. And check out my other Yakuza videos. I got episode 2 of the Shinada Show releasing in November, so check out my catalog, share with your friends, and please my Yakuzers, let me know in the comments what your hopes are for Dark Ties. Are you excited? What do you want to see? Let me know. Until next time, Mr. TDF out. And support my Patreon.